his utter astonishment that his pecker was as hard as a rock for the first time in 2 years. He shook his wife by the shoulder until she woke up and showed her his enormous "Check this out," he happily exclaimed. "What do you think we should do with it?" With one eye open, his wife replied, "Well, now that you've got all the wrinkles out, it would be a good time to wash it." So Johnny woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom. On the way back to bed, he passed his parents' room. When he looked in, he noticed the covers bouncing. He called to his dad. "Hey Dad, what are you doing?" The dad answered, "Playing cards." Little Johnny asked, "Who's your partner?" The dad answered, "Your mom." Little Johnny then passed by his older sister's room again. He noticed the covers bouncing. He called to his sister. "Hey sis, what are you doing?" The sister answered, "Playing cards." Little Johnny asked, "Who's your partner?" She answered, "My boyfriend." A little later, Dad got up and went to the bathroom. As he passed Little Johnny's room, he noticed the covers bouncing. He called to his son, "What are you doing?" Little Johnny answered, "Playing cards." Dad asked, "Really? Who's your partner?" Little Johnny answered, "You don't need a partner if you have a good hand." Two old retirees were talking about naughty acts in a cafe. When they finished, the two retirees paid their bill and leave the cafe. A young man sitting next to them has overheard the conversation and smiles to himself, thinking it would be quite amusing to see two old retirees going at it. He gets up and follows them. Sure enough, he sees the two old retirees near the factory. The little old lady pulls off her panties and lifts up her dress. The old man pulls down his pants and grabs the lady's hips, and the little old lady then reaches for the fence. Well, what follows is 40 minutes of the most athletic the man has ever seen. The little old man is banging away at the little old woman at a pace that only can be described as phenomenal. Limbs are flying everywhere. The movement is a blur, and they do not stop for a single round. Finally, they collapse and don't move for an hour. The man is stunned. Never in his life has he ever seen anything that equates to this. Not in the movies. Not from his friends. Not from his own experiences. Reflecting on what he has just seen, he says to himself, "I have to know his secret. If only I could like that now, let alone in 50 years' time." The two old retirees have by this time recovered and dressed themselves. Gathering the courage, he approaches the older man. He says, "Sir, in all my life I have never seen anybody screw like that, particularly at your age. What's your secret? Could you like that 50 years ago?" The retiree replies, "Son, 50 years ago that fence wasn't electric." And wakes up one morning with the worst hangover and no recollection of the night before. Slowly opening his eyes, he sees a bottle of aspirin and a glass of water on the beside table. He looks around the room to find his clothes are neatly folded on the dresser with a clean shirt on top. The bedroom is immaculate. On the beside table is a note that says, "Darling, your breakfast is in the kitchen. I love you." Downstairs, he finds his favorite cereal, croissant, fresh OJ, and freshly brewed coffee waiting for him, along with the morning paper and his 15-year-old son, who is finishing his own breakfast. "Tell me, son," he asks, "what happened last night?" "Well," says the boy, "you came home so drunk you didn't even know your own name. You nearly broke the door down. Then you were sick in the hallway. Then you knocked the furniture over, and when Mom tried to calm you down, you thought she was the police. So you gave her a black eye. Christ, says the man. Then how come my clothes are folded, the house is tidy, and my breakfast is ready? When mom dragged you into the bedroom and tried to get your pants off to put you into your bed, you shouted at her, "Get your filthy hands off of me! I'm married." Old couple had been married for 50 years. They were sitting at the breakfast table one morning when the old gentleman said to his wife, "Just think, we've been married for 50 years. "Yeah," she replied. "Just think. 50 years ago we were sitting here at this breakfast table together." "I know," the old man said, "but we were probably sitting here starting 50 years ago." "Well," Granny snickered, "what do you say? Should we strip?" So the two stripped to the buff and sat down at the table. "You know, honey," the little old lady said, "my nipples are as hot for you today as they were 50 years ago." "I wouldn't be surprised," replied Gramps. "One is in your coffee and the other one is in your porridge." Priest was driving along and saw a nun on the side of the road. He stopped and offered her a lift, which she accepted. She got in and crossed her legs, forcing her groan to open and reveal a lovely leg. The priest took a look and nearly had an accident. After regaining control of the car, he stealthily slid his hand up her leg. The nun looked at him and immediately said, "Father, remember Psalm 129? The priest was flustered and apologized profusely. He forced himself to remove his hand. However, he was unable to remove his eyes from her leg. Further on, while changing gear, he let his hand slip up her leg again. The nun once again said, "Father, remember Psalm 129? Once again, the priest apologized. "Sorry, sister, but the flesh is weak." Arriving at the convent, the nun got out, gave him a meaningful glance, and went on her way. On his arrival at the church, the priest rushed to receive a Bible and looked up Psalm 129. It said, "Go forth and seek. Further up, you will find the glory." Blonde and a brunette walk into a bar. As they sit down, the brunette notices a guy checking out the blonde. So the brunette decides to go and talk to this guy. She walks up to him and says, "I see you've been checking out my friend. You know, the blonde sitting over there, she's pretty, isn't she?" The guy responds, "Oh man, she's just gorgeous, absolutely beautiful." The brunette says, "Well, for $50 I can arrange for you to smell her crotch." The guy says, "Well, yes, of course." He pulls out the money and hands it to her. She takes it and breathes in his face. One day when the teacher walked to the blackboard, she noticed someone had written the word penis in tiny letters. She turned around and scanned the class looking for the guilty face. Finding none, she quickly erased it and began her class. The next day she went into the room and she saw in large letters the word penis again on the blackboard. Again she looked around in vain for the culprit, but found none. So she proceeded with the day's lesson. Every morning for about a week, she went into the classroom and found the same disgusting word written on the board. And each day the word was larger than the day before. Finally, one day she walked in expecting to be greeted by the same word on the board, but instead found the words, "The more you rub it, the bigger it gets." When Ralph first noticed his penis was growing longer and stayed erect longer, he was delighted, as was his wife. After several weeks, his penis had grown to 20 inches. Ralph became quite concerned as he was having problems dressing and even walking. So he and his wife went to see a prominent urologist. After an initial examination, the doctor explained to the couple that, though rare, Ralph's condition could be fixed through corrective surgery. "How long will Ralph be on crutches?" the wife asked anxiously. "Crutches? Why would he need crutches?" responded the doctor. Well, said Ralph's wife coldly, you are going to lengthen his legs, aren't you? In a mental institution, a nurse walks into a room and sees a patient acting like he's driving a car. The nurse asks him, Charlie, what are you doing? Charlie replies, driving to Chicago. The nurse wishes him a good trip and leaves the room. The next day, the nurse enters Charlie's room just as he stops driving his imaginary car and asks, well, Charlie, how you doing? Charlie says, I just got into Chicago. Great, replies the nurse. The nurse leaves Charlie's room and goes across the hall into Bob's room and finds Bob sitting on his bed furiously masturbating. Shocked, she asks, Bob, what are you doing? Bob says, I'm doing Charlie's wife while he's in Chicago. One day, a little girl and a little boy were at the park with their pants pulled down. The little girl asked the little boy, what is that? And the little boy said, I don't know. Then the little boy asked the little girl the same thing and she said she didn't know. So that night, the little girl asked her mom and her mom said, that's your garage and you must not let any big trucks go in. Meanwhile, at the little boy's house, the little boy asked his dad what it was and his dad said, that's your big truck and you must not park it in any garage. The next day, the boy and the girl pulled their pants down again, but this time the girl went home with blood on her hands. Her mom screamed and asked why she had blood on her hands. The girl said, the boy tried to put his big truck in my garage, so I pulled his two back tires off.